Welcome to another episode of TechUnhinged, where tech gets human, powered by Code District. I'm your host, Rabia Javeed, and today we have a guest who has spent more than 2 decades in healthcare technology. First at one of Indiana's biggest health systems, and now as CIO of Mahaska Health, a rural hospital in Iowa. He's a CTO of the Year honoree who was building data warehouses long before AI made them urgent. Today we are talking about why AI strategies keep dying on legacy systems and how to keep yours alive. Bob, welcome to TechUnhinged.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
Well, Bob, we'll start off with the icebreakers. You went from one of Indiana's biggest health systems to a rural hospital in Iowa. What surprised you most about that move?
This is an excellent question. So I have spent the majority, actually, I've spent all of my life in Indiana. And when I moved out to Iowa, I didn't anticipate the beauty. I know it's a Midwestern state. It's hard for me to describe. You can put Midwest states as flyover states. Typically there's laughter associated with that. But Iowa, with the rolling hills, the sunshine, the greenery. I know there's a lot of farms. It has this natural beauty. I have a 30-minute commute coming to work every morning. And as the sun's rising, as I see the hills and how the sun is coming out, it's very serene.
When you picture the legacy systems that you deal with, what's the one that gives you the most trouble, and why, is it still around?
I would say, so the good news is where I'm at today, there's been a lot of work. I have people that have been prior to me that have done a lot of work with the infrastructure. So when it comes to legacy systems, I would say I tend to be an off-prem proponent, and we do have a number of on-prem systems here. And I can't say we have a lot of big issues with them, but just managing them and making sure that after a 5-year or 7-year rotation, as far as their age is concerned, and replacing those systems, they tend to be costly things. They tend to be things that we definitely have to plan for, and we need to be proactive about so they don't end up being out of service or out of warranty or end up having issues. So I would say the good news is that we're in a good place in terms of legacy systems. We don't have ones that are really old. We've done a good job. And since I've been here, I had a strategic plan around ensuring that we really old, and we've taken care of those over the past few years I've been here, and just prioritizing the next step. If there's things that we can move to off-prem, we move to do that. If for logistical reasons or cost reasons we can't, then we ensure that we have a rotation, make sure they're inventoried, know the age, make sure that we have plans for how we're going to keep them in service and replace.
Well, good points. The common assumption is that legacy systems stick around because no one's bothered to replace them ever. When an organization actually commits to a replacement, how does it play out in practice?
Really, really good question. It's around risk. And so what you end up wanting to do in practice is have a real good handle as to what those systems are, how in terms of priority. I tend to use a risk matrix, and that goes around cybersecurity. It goes around hardware, software, is have a real good understanding as far as what those systems are, what they do, what is their age, what is the expected age as to how long they'll last, and then what are the things that they support. Have all of that within a risk matrix, and then that ends up being the foundation for what your plan will be around how you're going to manage those.
Well, Bob, in health tech, you simply can't afford to disrupt care delivery. How does that constraint reshape the conversation about modernization before AI even enters the conversation?
Very good question. And I would say that once again, it comes back to risk matrix, comes back to ensuring that with the systems that you already have in place, if you're looking to augment those or you're looking to change those, is you need to have a plan on. You need to have a risk matrix. You need to have those systems inventoried and a firm understanding as far as what you have, where you're looking to go, and how you're going to map that path to that future. The interesting thing about AI too with healthcare is, AI has all the buzzwords. AI is talked about. It has a lot of potential uses and a lot of potential benefits. You have to be really, really careful though about how you apply it and what type of use cases you want to apply it, especially when it comes to healthcare. Human has to be in the loop. The you have to have a human validating that information at the endpoint, whether it's a clinician, a coder, or whatever. And as you go to employ AI, you have to understand too that the data that is driving that AI, you have to have a real good firm grip on how that data looks. So you have to have data governance. You have a real good firm understanding of that data and the veracity. Make sure the veracity is.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So Bob, Gartner says that through 2026, 60% of AI projects will be banned because the underlying data is not just ready. So when you go looking for the data a project needs and it's just not there in any usable form, how do you surface that without killing the project on the spot? A. And B, once you are taking down the work to fix it, how do you show people it's actually moving the needle?
Well, I would say it goes back to measurement and it goes back to planning. As you are, once again, you have your current state, you have what the future state will be, you have the unrealized benefit of what you're looking to use, whether it's AI or another system. And you have to have a good, firm understanding. What is your current state? What is that needle you're looking to move? Have measurement philosophy and measurement methodologies around how you're going to show benefit or detriment around that. And as you go to deploy, you have to have a plan. You have to have everything as well mapped out as you can. You have to have your contingency plans, your mitigations for the contingencies. Long story short, it comes down to regimen, planning, testing, and measurement.
Well, Bob, the people who've spent years working around legacy quirks have basically become this system themselves. When you modernize, what happens to that knowledge?
No, I would say that adaptation is going to be the key. And the people that you have that are working, so that's another thing too, is it comes down to the people the resources that you have that are working within. So there's a few things about legacy knowledge. Is you have to make sure that there's redundancy there. You don't want to have singular points of failure. Something that I've seen over the years is you'll have that institutional knowledge and it tends to be focused on one person. And if that person's gone or missing, you end up with this gap that you're not able to support the system in a good way. So one, make sure that knowledge is transferred to other people, make sure it's shared with other people. And then within the team, you're going to have to create a culture of adaptability. Things change. I've been in IT for a very long time. I've seen it. I've seen servers that are millions of dollars that are gigantic that now we have the processing power in your finger would probably be faster than those things. And with people within IT, they always have to be adaptive. And so the people that you have working with your team, you got to promote a culture of adaptability and move them along. You have to work with them and make sure that they have the knowledge they need, have the skill sets they need, and the education that they need to be present.
Here's an interesting one. In health tech, there's a lot of gap between a tool being approved and a clinician actually using it at a point of the care. What does it take to earn that trust at the bedside, and what happens to it the first time something goes wrong?
So this is really good too. A real good dynamic is a lot of this comes back to perception management. Is systems are going to fail, and for better or for worse, we know that to be true. And at the bedside, it becomes a critical. And when it comes to interactions with your clinicians and physicians, you have to start with trust. And by starting with trust, you show that you're listening. So something that I have informatics folks that within my team, and informatics is this intersection of clinical needs and IT is essentially what that is. And my informatics folks are out there. They're working at the elbow with these clinicians and physicians to understand their needs, understand their workflows, and to have a real good sense as to if we're going to deploy technology to these folks, how do we deploy it in such a way that it provides benefit to them without adding burden to them? And so a concise answer to your question is start with having a good understanding as to, I like to call it the Gemba, the source. So your source, know what's important to them, know those workflows, understand how that technology is going to embed within those. And then as you're working, always show you're listening, showing that you are taking their needs into account as you deploy the technology. And then as it's deployed, make sure that you have people at their elbow that are able to help.
When an AI project stalls on a legacy system, IT won't touch the AI side and the AI vendor won't touch the legacy side. How do you structure the contract and the accountability in such cases?
I think you might have answered my question question for me. Hey, so you mentioned structure the contract. So I think the contract structure is very important. There are a kind of a guilty pleasure of mine is I like to read contract. I don't know why. I've always been like that. So you read through those, you have a good understanding of the SLAs, what that line of demarcation is, right? You want to firm that up. You got to understand those roles, responsibilities. Something that I like to do for project is you want to have something called a RACI. I don't know if that's, I think people out there have heard of that concept. Roles, accountabilities. You want to have things mapped out. So let's say we're going to have something new. We're going to do an AI product. And we're going to release that product. So to your point, we got something over here. We got something over here. And it's going to blend. These folks here need to understand clearly what they're responsible, accountable, and informed on. That's where it comes down. So as best as you can, try to clarify that within your contract itself. And once you get to that point, when you have, because there'll be a project plan or a program or something like that, when you go to deploy this, within that plan itself, you have to have those accountabilities, responsibilities, all those things well spelled out so that folks know and there's no lack of clarity. And escalation point, you need those spelled out as well.
On that note, you've said on your LinkedIn that in 2025 you didn't retire an AI model, you retired an approach and set up a center of excellence instead. What made it clear the pilots weren't really working for you, and what does the center of excellence do that they never could?
So the issue that we had really, and I imagine that other organizations are doing the same thing. So we are a customer right here in the middle. AI's everywhere. All these people are like AI, you want AI, sell to you. The issue that we were having is with Ounce, we were we weren't really looking at our use cases holistically is a good way to. So AI had a buzz. Everything sounds awesome. Everything sounds interesting. So we had people coming to us rather than us. Let's huddle together. Let's brainstorm together. What are the needs of our organization so that we have a cohesive, centralized plan around what we want to focus on. So the approach, a couple of approaches that we changed is one, instead of essentially we were listening to a lot of folks pitching us on different ideas. They all sounded great, but we are tied to Epic. That's our EMR. And a lot of those products are bolt on into Epic. And there are pros and cons as to that approach. And so what we had to do is, okay, we're going to stop. No offense for those selling, but stop the noise for a second. Let's regroup. Let's internalize. Let's talk amongst ourselves. What are the things that we want to focus? And so what we decided is we're going to focus on ambient. We're going to focus on things that are helpful to our clinicians and our physicians. And that center of excellence that you're referring to is a cross-functional group of people. So I have physicians, clinicians, technical people. We have data scientist person in there. And we are all literally talking about what is it within our organization that we want to focus on and what would be most helpful to those on the front lines or those within finance. And then let's do RFPs, have some regimen around the approach as the people approaching us. Let's reach out. Here's what we're looking at. Tell us what you can do for those specific use cases.
No, that was very thorough. Bob, in your capacity, do you often happen to work with doctors themselves directly as well?
Oh yeah, yes, absolutely.
At your side, how they are interacting with AI, given that now you give one snapshot to Claude or ChatGPT, and there are all these symptoms or issues that are with a human, perhaps. So how are the doctors taking this revolution of AI?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a real good question. I would say that what is nice is the physicians that they listen. I mean, so people do that, of course. And full disclosure, I do it for myself. You self-diagnosis, self-diagnosis for yourself. What's nice though is so when patients approach them and they've done some research, in a way, like that's a good thing, right? Like to have an informed consumer is always a good. So you come in and you talk to me and you're informed. As a physician, I'm going to listen to you, and I can use myself as a use case because I had this happen. Our physicians here, they listen and they say, I hear what you're saying. Now here's some pros and cons around that approach. Like they guide you without saying you're wrong or anything like that. We're going to use that AI, and this is really cool. So I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here. That's what's cool about AI. AI is like an augmentation. AI is not a replacement. So knowledge augmentation, you come in, you talk to a physician that we have here. Our physicians are very approachable and they just listen to you and they say, I hear what you're saying. Here's some of the things that you've brought up to me. Here's some of the suggestions that I have based upon the information I provide.
That's a great way to, go about it. So coming back to the, legacy systems, when we deploy, implement AI, it usually needs to connect to the outside world. And older systems or legacy systems, they fight that very thing, going outside, making things external perhaps. So when security flags a project, is that the end of it or is there a way through it?
I would say at our organization, I've seen it both ways, but I've worked at organizations where security ends up being the bad person, right? Like, no, not gonna, nope, 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 nope. Security is a balance. Cybersecurity is a balance. You can make your organization the best secured organization in the world by putting it in concrete, by locking it in a box. However, that's not useful to anyone. And so, like at our organization here, and what I promote here, and actually I have an awesome CISO that does this balance. Let's strike that balance. So what are the risks? And I keep mentioning, you're going to hear me go back to risk matrix a lot because that's the approach that I use for everything. What are the risks associated with what we're looking to do? So if we have a legacy system and it's going to connect out there, okay, let's go through, let's just map through what all those risks are. What are the likelihood of those risks? And what are the repercussions if that risk was to happen? And have a plan around it. That's really it. So there's some things we've already deployed here, not really legacy, more new. AI is actually a good example. We just had a real good understanding as to what that risk matrix looks like, and then have a real good plan around just mitigating those and maximizing value by minimizing risk.
No, I think these are, some of the great points. So talking about now the leadership, Bob, leadership approves the AI strategy, but the people who control the daily workflows are often the ones most threatened by what AI might expose about how things actually run. So how do you bring that layer along?
Yeah, engage them. You actually, so there's two kind of leadership approaches. There's the top down, there's bottom up. So the bottom up strategy is instead of, AI, we're going to bring in AI, it's going to impact your life. Instead of doing that, find out what that life looks like. So the workflows, whether it's, coding could be an example. I'm sure like revenue cycle can be examples of AI based product, clinician ambient listening, all those things. Anyways, long story short, reach out, learn those workflows, map those workflows. Even better if you can't, document that workflow. What does that look like today? What is that person doing today? How can AI be used, not to replace, but to benefit that? And then if there's something in there that it could reduce waste within that workflow, let's identify that too. So long story short, you build trust by engagement. You build trust by listening. You build trust by reaching out and seeking to understand what that person's doing rather than is my approach, at least.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But Bob, given your 20 years of experience in this, can you talk about one of the, on-ground examples that you went through with the legacy system and what were the hurdles that you came across? And why at that moment you thought that it is absolutely important to modernize it? Or you might even come across in these times with some org or health tech who is still going on with their legacy ways, and not thinking about modernizing, where the world is now talking about automating everything. But there has to be a layer to everything indeed, right? You modernize first and then you deploy AI perhaps. So if you can, for our listeners, talk about any of those examples and how did you deal with that?
What's interesting is I feel like if I look back on my years, position in terms of legacy systems I have. So stories like horror stories I could think of where the legacy system was an issue, thankfully are in the past. Don't get me wrong, there are some legacy systems that actually here at the organization we're working on too. And the modernization roadmap really is making sure that, so we have a system that say is getting close, hasn't hit out of life yet, but it's getting close. And so now we got to think, okay, what's the next step? So we're planning for that. But to answer your question, I would say so you want a horror story? Is that what I heard? The horror story?
I want one.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the legacy system, It was an EMR. Actually, it was a billing system. It was GE. This goes back probably 15 years ago. It was VAX. You know what VAX is? You want to talk
Um,
about legacy?
no.
Okay. Old hardware Unix, like gigantic boxes that today can fit in your hand as far as processing power. Anyways, long story short, it was old, it was dated, and actually volunteered to be a temporary CIO. The previous CIO left, so I came in, volunteered. I found out about this system. It was at that time it was 10 years old, and it was very close. Like cross figures, don't breathe on it because that thing's going to fall apart. I ended up entering into a service contract with a third party that could help manage the support of that device because it was completely out of warranty. Everything in this thing was just old, and it went down. One of the boxes, the entire box, the motherboard, like hardware or drives you could replace, even processors you could replace. The entire board went down, and we were losing upwards of $100 million a day because this thing was down because we couldn't bill, we couldn't do anything. We were stuck in the water. It was, long story short, having that third party contract saved us. It really did. So what they ended up doing is they found a motherboard. They ended up driving, like it was all manual. They got a truck and drove this thing. They found a box. They drove it back. They deployed it for us within like 48 hours. And I mean, this was a needle in a haystack as far as trying to find. And I guess this story, so I'm going to get back to my point of the story, is no matter what it is, there's going to be legacy systems that you're going to have in place that maybe you're a new CIO or you don't know about. It's in a closet someplace and you find out about it. You're like, whoa, holy moly. You got to figure out very quickly, what is your mitigation, your risk strategy? What is the risk associated? What is your mitigation for that? That's essentially all I did. I couldn't replace it. It was going to be hundreds of millions of dollars to replace. There was no replacement path for it. So I had to figure out, how am I going to reduce the risk? That's all I did. That's all you can do. You just do what you can with those systems.
Yeah, no. I mean, this horror story is definitely gonna land with our listeners, I'm sure. Oh, we're gonna get a snippet out of this as well because I mean it's about high time people stop
Yeah.
hopping onto, the shiny bolt-on AI approach
Yeah.
and start thinking
Yeah.
about how to do it right, perhaps.
This reminds me of something else too. Just something I've tried to model for myself and is Poise. So let's say the worst thing happens, like in this case it did, is there's a difference between the leadership that's kind of like this, right? During those moments. I'm sure the listeners have seen that. And then there's the leadership of where it's kind of like they're steady, they're centered, they're focusing on what can be done, focusing on helping the team where they can. And that has this very big downstream impact on the team. And that was something, I'll use myself as an example. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Through that moment, everyone is coming at me. I had COOs, CEOs. They're like, when is this going to be working? And I stayed calm. And my team was able to stay calm because of that. So we were able to weather the storm just by focus on what we can do, and we get it. Yeah. And that's everything too with technologies. If you're moving from legacy to new, you're bringing in AI, no matter what that is, never, in fact, not only not forget the human element, prioritize the human side of that. Is understand, engage, build trust, get people involved. Like, people like to be involved. So
Yeah. So, my next question is also the extension of this. Maintaining legacy systems already eats 60 to 80% of the IT budgets. And now AI work lands on the same teams. No wonder the teams which are
yeah.
handling those systems, they're handling, the AI advancements as well. So how do you decide what those teams work on first and what has to wait?
Yeah, that's a real good question. So in our organization, it gets back to, I think I mentioned, priorities in our center of excellence and what is it that we want to focus. And so within our organization, we've made this decision that we're going to be focused on, so Epic is our EMR. We're focused on their roadmap. So that helps us from a pure technical perspective, because now we've essentially outsourced what we're going to do with AI, unless we bring in a bolt-on. So how I've approached this with my team is with AI. I've had conversations with them, and I've said, hey, AI's here, it's coming. I do have people, full transparency. I have some people that are on my team. They haven't done too much with AI. It's all good. I'm promoting to them that, build your knowledge, understand it, do everything you can to get a good understanding of it, because it's coming. coming. And so I'm putting them in training, all of those, building that knowledge for them.
So, moving a bit ahead, legacy vendors are now selling AI add-ons as well. How do you tell a genuine upgrade from a tool designed to keep you dependent?
Yeah, wow. That's a good one. I would say once again, it gets back to read the contract language. Whatever you're signing up for, have a real good understanding, firm understanding as to what it is, what it does, what is the impact to you and your organization when you go down that path. That's really it. And if it's a lock-in for 3 years, 5 years, understand what that lock-in is and understand what your exit strategy is if you need to exit from it. But something else I'll get back to is like all of these things. I mentioned planning earlier. So here at the organization, I have a 3-year strategic plan. I have it for infrastructure and infrastructure type things, and I have it for AI based technologies too. So what are the use cases? What are our focal points? Where is it the organization is looking to go? What's that strategic plan? Make sure that technology strategic plan and AI one is folded into that. So it follows the same planning. So that's my guide. So when I'm thinking strategy, that's the guidepost. Tactical things like not deprecate, but they decompose down from that strategic plan.
Yeah. So now we're moving towards the last question of our conversation.
Sure.
After 2 decades of building data foundations, what's something you used to believe that you've had to unlearn? And what would you tell other CIOs and CTOs who are just starting to figure out that for out themselves?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I've had to unlearn is not, if you have knowledge, so a technology person starts out thinking they got to be the smartest person. That's what I thought. So I started way back then. I need to be the smart guy. I need to be the person who's always speaking up. I had to unlearn that because when you're surrounded by, I've been in rooms where there's so many intelligent people and build that culture where everyone can join in. There's so much strength in that. That's probably the biggest thing that I've had to unlearn is cultivate this, whatever meeting you're in, whatever group you're in, cultivate this culture where everyone can join in and kind of give their 2 cents so we can all combine to like this real good move forward plan. Yeah. You could be the smartest person in the room, but you don't have to be the person who always talks.
Yeah.
That's what I've had to unlearn.
What would your advice be to the other CIOs and CTOs who are just, figuring things out for themselves and starting their careers perhaps as in this role?
I think something that served me over the years, finding people I could learn. So people who are starting in this role, give themselves grace. Don't be too hard on yourself. Don't have the imposter syndrome. You don't have to know everything and show some vulnerability and learn from others that are around you and continue that throughout your career. And you'll find that as a growth opportunity for yourself and as the ability to, it increases engagement with other people too. That's something that has served me well.
Yeah, well, Bob, thank you so much for such a grounded and honest conversation about, your work and everything that you've said. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.